Hi, I'm Angela Hanks. I'm a counselor in the Secretary's office at the Department of Labor, and I'm really glad to be here today with Earl Buford, who is the president of the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning. And we're going to be having a conversation today that I'm really looking forward to. So before we get started, maybe Earl and I can just share a little bit about our backgrounds. And Earl, maybe I'll turn it over to you first to talk a little bit about CALE.
Great. Thank you, Angela. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and really excited to sit here with my good friend Angela and have this really in-depth conversation about a variety of topics that are topical, for lack of a better term. I am president of CALE. I am 2.5 months into my tenure as president, and which is really exciting, and lots of opportunity, especially right now. For some of you out there who know, I spent the last 8 years running 2 workforce systems, most recently in Pittsburgh, PA, and before that in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And for 15 years before that, I ran the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership, one of the nation's labor management intermediaries, and you know, having lots of fun in all that work. But what's the tough part about these conversations is, as for someone like me who's been around 20 plus years and doing, I think, pretty good work and having some effect. Now, we still haven't hit the jackpot yet. So that's why we're having this conversation, these conversations, because what can we do to move forward to achieve the ever elusive scale, and what does scale mean, and how to, and who's affected by that. So just really exciting to have this conversation.
Yes, I totally agree. So I am similarly new in my role. I joined the Department of Labor in January, and it's really been, I think, an incredible time to be working on these issues for all of us, because we're coming out of a crisis that really is so deep and had such a widespread impact on so many people across the country. And so, so much of the department and the focus of the department and the administration has really been, how do we not just get back to where we were in March of 2020, which, 3% unemployment sounds pretty good, especially even right now. But really, we know that even in that pre-pandemic labor market, there were many people who were struggling, especially communities of color. And so this is certainly about rebuilding, but we can't just build back to where we were. We really have to sort of move beyond what we've traditionally accepted from the labor market. So that means closing gaps by race and gender when it comes to income, to employment, and really ensuring that we're creating good opportunities for all. And so I can talk more about this when we get into the conversation, but the administration has laid out many priorities through the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan, that are really designed to make our economy stronger than it was even before the pandemic, and really a fundamental focus for the administration, and I can certainly say at the Department of Labor, is equity, and ensuring that equity is something that runs throughout all of the work that we do. So Earl, I wanted to maybe start our conversation by just reflecting a little bit on the last 1.5 years. Obviously, this is something that none of us have ever experienced in our lifetimes before. I don't think any of us are in a rush to experience anything like this again, but it really has, in many ways, felt like it's sort of uncovered many of the sort of underlying challenges that workers face across the country. And so I'm just curious, I know you're new in your role here, but if you can talk about your time in Pittsburgh and sort of what it meant to be living through this crisis.
Yeah, no, it's, between the pandemic and we'll talk about that, and also, obviously some of the social justice items that came to the surface and that were playing out, just really crazy times, but also opportunity. And so, in Pittsburgh, myself and some other leaders, business, civic leaders, and labor and education, the community said, what can, with this opportunity that's in front of us, how do we want Pittsburgh to look coming out of this pandemic? And so the opportunity was, everyone, thinking most cities this happened, everyone kind of ran to corners and started doing stuff. There was, I'm going to create this new initiative at the community services level, or the economic development folks were going to get all this money together, and the CDFI. So everyone's doing stuff, which is great, but there was no coordination to it. So we could already see that it was going to be the same old, where, some small effect, but no grand effect. So I'll never forget the moment. I think I was in the board of directors meeting, but my workforce board, and just said to them, you know what, if we don't come together in a comprehensive fashion, and I don't mean form a task force, but there's got to be a way to coordinate all of this so that we're supportive of all these good efforts, but we have a vacuum and the ability to create new efforts. And so we actually created a task force called Ready to Work. And the idea was, how do we bring the right players together to talk about the emergency, the immediate effect of the pandemic and what was needed there. And so from there, we said, well, let's phase this so that over the next year and a half, 2 years, we walk out of this with some real meaningful achievements, or at least some sustainability. And so Ready to Work had 3 phases emerged right away. The immediate phase, which we're dealing with everything from contact tracing and supporting the county and the state's efforts, and also private business, and also how do we connect the citizenry and also, quite frankly, community groups that were in neighborhoods doing great work, and churches. So we wanted to really get ahead of that on the public safety side, but also on the worker side. And then also, as the workforce system in the state, we're dealing with, unemployment, and the massive unemployment, and dislocated designations, and all that. We want to put all that under one big tent. Childcare as well. The shutdown of childcare, but some companies that wanted to reopen in 3 to 6 months, how are their workers going to have this take advantage of the services? So all that was under one big tent in the first emergency phase. We can go dive deeper in that if we need to. The point is, we had a coordination model. Second phase is going to, what I call an intermediate phase. And that was going to be, all right, with all these things that are happening, how do we support them? So let's put this task force together. And I forgot to mention who's all on the task force. So the president of the community college, representing education, the representation from our civic association in Allegheny Conference, the head of biggest family foundation in town, the business leader, et cetera, labor. Everyone was at the table and agreed on this phase. Well, so in the intermediate phase, we worked on, like, the economic groups and the CDFIs were putting loans out to support businesses. So how do we support that and add a workforce component, and which normally doesn't happen? We always say workforce is the economic development, but we never really act upon that, right? So that gave us the opportunity to do those kind of things. That's just one example. Other things happen. And so long term is that, well, with our regional plan for how do we continue expansion, but also, most importantly, how do we start to really, what's our supply strategy here? What's our worker strategy here? Where's their voice in this equation? And so we knew that JP Morgan Chase Advancing Cities was coming up, which is out now actually, and said, let's get ourselves ready for that type of application. So we developed an Advancing Pittsburgh model, which really mimics what JPMC was asking for in their applications. They gave us a template to say, all right, how do we set up a Black business accelerator? How do we, all these pieces were now part of a sustainable model. So just really proud of that outline of this ecosystem. It's not there yet. It's still working through those things. But the point was that honestly, this opportunity, let's deal with things immediately. Let's make sure our workforce is really attached in a public way, but also a smart community way. And then what's our long-term effect and design and desire? So as a matter of fact, that group meets tomorrow. I'm still on their committee, I've left Kale, and Kale is now a member. So really excited that that we took that leadership initiative to bring it together. So I just wanted to give you the outline, and that's how the last years went. That's how it's come full circle with my new work, still being able to be a part of that.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's sort of amazing that all of this work could also happen during a pandemic. Like we're all experiencing it too. Yeah. So it's really amazing that you were able to bring such a powerful partnership together during some really challenging times, for everyone.
I'm just glad they wanted to do it. I mean, it's so easy to start something that peters out, and there's been no lack of attendance. There's been no lack of energy. As a matter of fact, everything had to start from day one to now has just grown exponentially. And they've added me now, so I'm really happy.
So I don't want to hog the conversation, but I did want to actually pick up on 2 things that you mentioned that I just would love to talk a little bit more about. So I think one is you've mentioned childcare, and I know in your previous work and now. One of the real challenges coming out of this recession is that, things are still reopening and we're making incredible progress every day, but, a lack of childcare is still a barrier. The pandemic and the recession have hit women particularly hard, in part because women have disproportionate caregiving responsibilities. And so I just am kind of curious, I think would love to talk a little bit about how we sort of use those partnerships and use these opportunities to ensure that we're getting people the supportive services they need as well.
No, well said. As a matter of fact, there were kind of three parts to the childcare strategy. One was obviously, how do we keep that industry moving because it's so important. So for phase one was, how do we, luckily our Department of Human Services in Allegheny County is just such a robust service department that they already have been convening all the providers on the ground. So we had that. And the flip side of that is our corporate partners, as they were hoping to bring people back, we're going to develop their own childcare systems, just because, whether they hire one of those vendors or created something themselves. So we had to meet them halfway, to come together and go, let's make this work together. We already have 12 or 10 or whatever the right number is, robust providers. So what do we do to build them up? Do they need loans from our county economic development office? Or our CDFI? That's why that was so important in the earlier integration. So there is some synergy now between that. The second piece was, how to get our workers back. And then also, is it worth coming back with what the pay is in that industry? So we borrowed a Philadelphia model that run by SEIU 1199 and our good friend Cheryl over there.
Yeah.
And we brought their apprenticeship program, the childcare apprenticeship program, to Pittsburgh with the help of our Heinz Foundation and also the Kellogg Foundation. We are now a full-fledged partnership with 2 universities. So that's where higher ed, community college, and I think it was Carlo, I believe, maybe it was Chatham, one of the 2. And so that's where the schoolwork was happening. And so the idea that upon graduation, these 10 providers are ready to hire you, and here's the wage that's been agreed upon. So after years of the child workers saying we just can't afford to do this work that we love, this is our step towards better pay, better equity, and also a supply into said, and also some support from our corporate partners, particularly the banks. The banks have really stepped in because one, they had the greatest need for bringing workers back, and two, a lot of them are giving, Bank of America, PNC, et cetera. And so then the third piece was, as a workforce system, how were we providing stipends to workers who were going there, and or workers going back to work that allow them to utilize these services. So we developed a stipend system as well. So not the full answer, but it's just more steps towards and taking, creating the opportunity and utilize the opportunity, I should say. So really excited that all those players came together again. And we laughed earlier that it took a pandemic for all of us to start to really work together and systems come together, but it's what happened.
Right. And I mean, I'm so glad, I think wages are such an important part of this conversation. I'm glad that's a part of the thinking. I think that's, something that can easily feel like sort of outside of our scope, but it seems like very central to the work that we're all doing. And so I am so glad you mentioned apprenticeship. So obviously apprenticeship is a big priority of this administration, and something that I know you and I care really deeply about. And for folks who haven't seen it, in the American Jobs Plan, the president proposes a really major investment in apprenticeship, so $10 billion over the course of 10 years. And the idea is, we want to both expand the number of apprentices that exist in America, but also we really want to make sure that we are diversifying apprenticeship, both in terms of expanding into new industries, and childcare is a great example, but also in terms of bringing in communities that have historically not participated in these programs for a variety of reasons. So women of color, people of color generally, people with disabilities. We really want to make sure that they are centered in our work to expand apprenticeship programs. And I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to pick up on what you mentioned about wages in the childcare space, because I totally agree that it is about sort of expanding into these industries where women or people of color dominate already, but also making sure that the quality of these programs and of the jobs that result from them are as good as the jobs that people are getting out of apprenticeships now. So this is more of a comment, but I just really appreciate that focus, because I think it is really in line with all of our goals to do this.
Well, and kudos to you and the administration, the leadership at your department and the Biden administration for really humanizing apprenticeship in your administration. You know, I try not to get too political in these conversations, but you know, the onslaught of apprenticeship prep work in the last administration was it just didn't feel like there was any heft. And so your design, your desire, and also the resources. What's the old? I went to Catholic school, so time, talent, treasure. I feel like it applies here, and the department is leading that. And that actually, with all the diversity of apprenticeship now, you know, childcare, and you know, we've worked really hard with your department with Principal Financial and development of that financial planning apprenticeship that guys are recognized. You know, that started in Milwaukee when I was still working at the Milwaukee board with our good friends from Principal, and now I believe they're in outside of DOL, they're actually now progressing in some of the SAC states too. That's the beauty of that project is it's still taking financial planning and really diversifying and adding more equity to, and quite frankly, in Black and brown financial planners. And instead of working 3 months and then you have a year to build your book of business and get to all your credentials, and just really exciting. And I can't wait to see that really take off in more states, including the states I live in now. So just those kind of diversity of apprenticeship is really cool to see develop, and that there's resources to support that. But also, most importantly, the employers are starting to really get into how this really helps their supply issue, and and that. And I know this is not related, but at some point I'd love to talk about labor market participation rates. And I know they're climbing, so again, great work on that. But also just recently,
I'm happy to take credit for that.
Yeah, take credit for that, and definitely take credit, you personally. But I also know that the rates are really low for 16 to 24-year-olds, the traditional hard, even though we've summer jobs programs and all the things that are happening that are really well, that number is still low. So I'd love to talk about ways to get more, especially 18 to 24-year-olds engaged, whether it's apprenticeship or just in the world of work, so they can start to climb those ladders. And last month, Maria Flynn and I were on a panel, I think it was with Chuki, I believe, from your department.
Yeah.
And one of the things that came up, and I've not coined the phrase for this yet, but trying to figure out a way to start thinking about pathways in terms of paths to those pathways, and how do we line up resources for each path. So whether it's someone's summer job and then, or their first job, and what happens next, and how does the public system better utilize and help them along the way without some of the entanglements that come with WIOA. And I'm not criticizing WIOA, I love it, but I know there's some more blended funding needed to make this really happen.
Yes, and I mean, just speaking directly to youth, I think I could not agree more. And we have to look no further than the last recession to see what happens if we don't invest enough in our young people during a period of crisis, and really just the effects that it has. Like, I will, I suppose, age myself exactly by saying, like, I was one of those people who graduated college right before the recession. So folks who were a few years after me, you could really see the sort of anecdotal impact, right? Like, it meant that people who were coming out of high school or coming out of college, like, really spent years struggling, and there were long-term effects on a whole generation, and certainly we don't want that for the next generation who are experiencing this crisis right now. And so, I think we tried really hard. Last time we learned some lessons about just like the intensity of investment and intention it takes to prevent sort of the scarring that happens to young people if they're sort of just swept up in a crisis that obviously they have no control over themselves. So I think certainly that is like an area of focus and priority. And in the way that we're thinking about, well, one, actually, I should mention, we put out some grants last week, geared specifically.
That was a plug. I knew that. No.
Thank you very much for teeing that up. So we put out $89 million in youth build grants. So that's going to young people who are participating in construction pre-apprenticeship programs. We also put out funds for the Pathways Home for Youth program. And that's also focused on helping young people who have either been disconnected from school or have interactions with the justice system really become ready to enter or re-enter the labor market. And I think that's really just the beginning. There are many investments in the AJP that I think will help support young people as they sort of move into, I think, the pathway to the pathway,
exactly.
as you said, right? Like, like, it's about many things. It's about having really high quality training that is engaging and leads to a good job, but it's also about having all of those services that help support young people who, we know 16 to 24-year-olds like are young, but they're still managing a lot of challenges, right? Like you can be 24 or 16 and you can be a parent, you can have household responsibilities, you could be the primary earner in your family. And so, we're really talking about a lot of weight that's put on these young people, and we have to do really everything we can to make sure that we're sort of making these pathways that are really hard to navigate now much easier. I couldn't agree more.
Well, again, kudos to you all, the department, for those resources, because they're sorely needed and focused that way. And I was on a panel yesterday, I think it was EduVentures, and one of the questions, Q&A, was really how do you get young adult learners, Black and brown adult learners, to come just back to school or to go to school. And I was, we have all kinds of theories and things like that. But I said just bluntly, well, what about credit for prior learning and prior learning assessments? And that's stuff that we push at Kale. So it didn't make sense to me to think that way. But like, if they know the end game going in, it's easier to say, okay, you could accept my past work or my past, because a lot of them have gone to school and dropped out for, as you know, a variety of reasons. So, well, why make them take this course again? Like that's another deeper conversation. But like you said, if they know the end game coming in, if they know if I go to this community college and I graduate with this certificate or with this AA and these 5 high growth areas, I can walk into jobs with these employers that are begging for people. I'm going to go through and complete, because I know that the end game is. So I know it sounds too simple when I say it, but it really is that simple.
I mean, I think there's nothing that's too simple about sort of cutting down on the amount of time that people have to, in many cases, like leave the labor market or take some time out to complete education or training. Like that's money. And so that does really add up. And if you can sort of ensure that people can get credit for things that they've already done and allow them to move more quickly through the thing they know they need and can sort of see the path toward, I mean, that's huge. That doesn't feel like a small thing.
And you said something in that response, and it's really to start thinking about our workers and our learners, young adults, particularly, they have economic goals in mind. So how do you meet them or help them start to think about what's going to help them get to their economic goals? And that's the world of work and career guidance and those things. So I see a trend in my work at Kale, and we're a membership organization, so we have 2,800 members. Most of them are higher ed. And in those conversations with college presidents, 2 things are emerging. One, they either need to find more resources or to really develop career counseling and career guidance or a career connection with either AJC or things like that. But what the presidents are really saying to me, help me find ways to get my students into work-based learning opportunities. And especially when I'm gonna get my seniors to graduate and walk into jobs. That's what we're really starting to work on.
Yes. So I think we might only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to
sort of
pull you way back. So I think we first met when you were at WRTP.
Yes.
And I will say, sort of the labor management model is very near to my heart. And I think as we're thinking about making some really major investments in education and training across the administration, one real priority, we have these priorities around equity, around job quality, and around worker voice. Yeah. And that model, I think, is so critical to ensuring that we're integrating worker voice into training programs, ensuring that they're leading to high quality jobs. And so I just kind of wanted to maybe take a minute to talk a little bit about what really works about that model and what's needed to make sure that model can thrive sort of more broadly.
No, great question. And the beauty of the RTP model, the regional training partnership model, if you will, was not only was it labor management, but it was the right labor management leaders sitting down together, figuring out the best business practices. And part of those best practices are, one, really developing their supply, really developing their workers, but also having the ability to listen to what's good for those workers. Because they're future members from the labor side, and they're future workers from the management side. So, and the other piece to that equation for them was, as they're going after projects, whether it's our industrial side, our utility side, and definitely our building trade side, those were, there was always that continuity on that, and then giving us the flexibility as their workforce team to really go out and quite frankly act as agents to the community. So I've tried to replicate some of that in the Pittsburgh work. So, for instance, we created the industrial manufacturing technician that you guys approved back in 2009, brought that to PA with the help of many good friends, JFF, Keystone, et cetera. Then I work with Cheryl and the childcare piece, which is labor management and scope. But you did something really interesting with the building trades, and around the Pittsburgh Penguins expansion, because they were expanding their stadium 30 acres in the near neighborhood called the Hill District. 100%, 98.9% African American, and so for that expansion to happen, there had to be some trust and also some really key community conversations. So, but in the end, all those folks want to work in good union jobs, construction or even service work. It was the key. I'll get back to where I'm going with this. So I made a decision on the board. I went to the labor management arm of the construction industry. I said, okay, what are you guys doing to really get real about apprenticeship and within key Pittsburgh communities? They said, well, we support all these programs. I said, well, okay, that sounds great, but there's nothing like what we did in Milwaukee here. And I think Pittsburgh has the potential to do that. So I said, tell you what, if you take the time and formulate that, get your management side, get the building trades together, get a key community partner, in this case was A. Philip Random Institute, and form a pre-apprenticeship, pre-model. And I said, I'll guarantee $250,000 a year from the workforce system every year if you do that. But they said, we love it. So we'll take it one further. We'll guarantee our graduates walk into apprenticeship. As long as they qualify, and if they don't qualify, that's usually, well, we don't qualify, so we can't take them. We'll make them laborers journey people, making $25 an hour while they wait for their apprenticeship qualifications to come in, or for them to meet that. Pittsburgh made that commitment, and it's been going on for 2+ years. It's about 92% African-American men, 8% women, which is right around the national average or a little above in some cases. I recently heard about the grants that came out recently.
The Wanto,
yes. So yes, thank you. So just really excited, but what it took a investment commitment from the workforce system, and it's also being supported by philanthropy as well, and actually some of the county TANF dollars are also part of that mix. So again, a blended funding model commitment. But back to your question, we all sat down and said, what can we do to build or replicate what others are doing? And that's a guarantee is guarantee. And by the way, the curriculum is the National Building Trades multi-craft course. So we're using things that have already existed, but the commitment was the most important thing. So the resources are there, the commitment from the industry is there, and it's amazing to see these workers graduate and go right to work.
Yes, yeah, that's incredible.
I want to replicate that and with our higher ed partners.
Yes. Just want to go across every city in the country and do that.
Well, that's the beauty of working in a national operation now, is I get a chance to work in many different regions and states and local areas now to say, let's develop something, or let's replicate what's out there and find the resource to do it. So I can go on and on with. We can spend another hour easy on just
I know.
that are popping up right now. That one I'm really proud of.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty incredible. And I mean, like I said, I think that is really a model that we've seen work in so many places, and it's not easy. It certainly takes a lot of effort and collaboration and partnership and resources. I was really interested to hear you say that you put some real money from the system into pulling together this partnership, because at least, from what I've been able to observe over the years, that can be such a barrier, is we, as you said, know and love the system, but we do know that it is chronically underfunded, and resources have really been scarce. And I'll just mention, the secretary was testifying in front of the House Education and Labor Committee last week. And this was one of the things that he really pressed upon, is that we know that we can do much more than what we have the resources to do right now. We've also learned a lot about what works, and so many of the investments in the AJP are really built off of learnings that have come out of work that's collaborative with the workforce system or is coming directly out of the workforce system. And so, we have to make sure that the resources are there so we can support, innovative and equitable practices that we know work. and that's something I think I'm really excited about. I know he's really excited about, and something we're hoping we can do over the next several years here.
Yeah, and I believe the secretary was in Milwaukee recently, a few weeks back.
He was. He went to visit WRTP.
Yeah, yes.
He had a fantastic visit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you knew this, but the secretary, before he sort of moved into this life, was a member of the laborers. He was
Right.
head of the building trades in Boston. So
Yep.
all of this is very near and dear to his heart, and he's actually got a lot of experience himself, sort of working in this space and building kind of the key partnerships like this. So I think it's sort of a natural thing for DOL to take on too.
Well, you just reminded me, you said that, and again, replicated from what RTP had done with their tech college there, and with literacy services, they formed a partnership where they, for those individuals who don't have their GED or HSCD, they added that component to the training. And so now Pittsburgh has replicated that with our literacy partners and the group I mentioned earlier. So that now now it's been being funded. The seed money was funded by, I believe, the Hillman Family Foundation in Pittsburgh. So it took philanthropy to add that component. So now the workforce system is going to take that on moving forward.
Oh, wow.
And so so now the other excuse of not, you don't have a driver's license, so you don't have your high school diploma, so you cannot even apply. Well, this takes that off the table.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah. So just, again, but it took this pandemic for a lot of people to sit down and go back to the premise of this conversation.
Right. Yeah. It is sort of incredible, like, obviously, again, this has been such a challenging time in so many ways, but in some ways it's brought a lot of problems that were just lying under the surface into stark relief. Like, I think we've seen that in a lot of the work here. I think that's true in the administration more broadly, as we sort of try to tackle some of the big pressing challenges that frankly are pressing, but have been pressing for a long time, right? Like many of these things predated the pandemic. We just have this moment where we're sort of, I think, realizing the extent to which we really can do much more to support workers, to support the economy, and make sure that we're contributing to and fostering an equitable recovery.
Yeah, again, if we don't either take advantage and move or set up systems, then shame on us.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got a lot of work to do, both of us. No pressure.
We're ready for it though. So.
But I'm very excited that you're on it, and I know that you'll do great things in this role and continue to support a lot of innovative work that's happening across the country.
Thank you for that. And it's right now we're trying to start a research project just to, again, what are best practices that have emerged for the past 2 years. So we're trying to find out ourselves. So we have a library of, state of Washington did this, or Milwaukee is doing this now, or Tampa are doing that, or Memphis, whomever. I want to see what's out there. So I'm also on a listening tour as well.
Well, we should definitely talk about that.
Okay.
Once you've learned some more, I would love to hear about it. And I'm sure I can speak for many folks at DOL. They feel the same way.
You got it. Well, thank you first of all, thank you for the opportunities to catch up. And
yeah, this is great.
And so thank you.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. It was good to talk to you.
All right. See you again soon.